I'm going to introduce Joe Travi, who is the CEO and owner of Village Handcraft Cabinetry.
All right.
Joe, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Lisa. Welcome, everybody. I'm excited to get started here today. We've spent a lot of time on the Small Business Council putting this together. And we've heard from a lot of our members of the challenges that other companies are having throughout the country with Rift White Oak. We're going to talk about white oak in general as a species, and we're going to be doing some education, and then we're going to have a lot of questions and answers. So we'll get started. All right. So yes, I am. Here we go. I'm Joe Travi, and I am the CEO of Village Handcrafted Cabinetry. We're a custom cabinet manufacturer, about 100 people here in outside of Philadelphia. We are design, build, and install. So we are keenly aware of the challenges with Rift White Oak. So I'm joined today with John DeMott. Again, all of these are members of our Small Business Cabinet Council. He is from Manti Wood Products, veneer manufacturer. Jeremy Rentschler, Indiana Dimension. He is the CEO. Then we have Lamar Troyer and Vince Mullet from Mullwoods. Lamar is the lead finisher over there at Mullwoods, and Vince is CEO. And I'm glad to have all of you. All right, so we're gonna dive right in here and talk about the types, the cuts of lumber. We're going to get into the popularity of Rift and why it's popular, what's driving this. We're going to talk about the challenges that we have with this species. We are going to then talk about the rising costs of it and some alternatives. We've been talking about this at KCMA in several different councils. So that's been something that has been talked about and asked about. So we want to give our members some feedback on this. The finishing challenges. This is going to be where Lamar is really going to be chiming in. We all know the challenges with this species. And then if you don't know, you're going to see some images of some positives and some negatives, and how to avoid the negatives. So, and then finally, how do we match the solid wood with the veneer? So these are the topics of today's discussion. And by all means, please, if you have questions and they're not regarding some of these topics, we have enough firepower on this website to help. So at least as best as we can. All right. So how is the lumber milled in its characteristics? So I'm going to give you just a brief overview here. This shows a log. It shows a plain sawn log being cut, a quarter sawn, where the quarter sawn is coming from. The rift sawn is in the same quadrant as quartered, and then live sawn for live edge tops. I'm going to ask Jeremy to jump in here. We just were talking about this briefly before we got started, and he had some really interesting information just about the cost and what's going on with Rift.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. So, group, as you're looking at the images here, quarter sawn, quarter in that log is extremely popular. It takes a huge log to do that. Indiana, Wisconsin, Michigan, we grow great logs for that. But specifically this Rift, I mean, if you've been out there buying it, it's anywhere from $9 to $10 a board foot. And if you look at what percentage of that log is actually Rift, it's a very small percent. And that's why you see such a huge price increase or price difference between plain sawn and Rift. Another great point here that I don't see on here is you see the rays, the fleck in when you're looking at quarter sawn lumber, and those are called medullary rays. And those are cells that run from the center of the log out to the bark, and that's what carries nutrients to the outside of the log. And the point of that being is you don't see that in the outside of the log as pronounced as you do on the quarter sawn. But if I could encourage you in any way, possibly to educate the consumers, would be that there's a lot more quarter sawn in a log than there is rift. And if there's ways to make the quarter sawn work for your clients, it's a lot better cost option than rift.
All right. Well, thanks, Jeremy. Thank you for chiming in there. We're going to go a little deeper and just kind of overall on. So rift sawn, as you can see, has very straight grain. And that's, again, what is driving a lot of the demand for this. So again, you can see an upper right corner that we're pulling from a very small quadrant of that log. And that's what's what drives the cost. But again, that's what gives it this very straight grain. As we get into Q&A and alternatives, we're going to talk about, there are alternatives out there to give you this look, that are, options, but not always exactly the same look, or you can't finish them. They're pre-finished materials. All right. So with the rift, it's the most stable of the cuts, because it's coming from that short portion of the log. It's obviously its cons is it's the most expensive, and it's a wasteful milling process. So it's supply and demand. Excuse me for 1 second. Somehow I'm missing. I'm going to bounce back here. Sorry about that. We missed a couple slides here. So let me get started from current slide. Apologize about that. Technical challenge. All right, plane sawn. So I did want to start with plane sawn, so I apologize. It's the most common and economical way to cut a log. And you can see in upper right quadrant how it's cut. So you're getting the best yield out of that log, but you're getting very wide grain pattern, cathedral. I think, Jeremy, you did you call these medullary rays?
Yeah, so the rays run from the center of the log, and you don't see those in flat sawn lumber like you're showing there.
Okay.
And when you talked about stability, plain sawn, because of the way it's cut, it's going to expand and contract in width only, versus rift will change its dimensions and thickness because of that sawing. So plain sawn grows in width, and rift only grows in thickness.
All right. Very good. And like Jeremy said, some of the cons here are obviously these boards are more prone to cupping and warping, with changes in humidity. So, all right. So let's go on to our quartered, and I'm having some technical difficulties sharing. So I think I'm going to have to stay on this. Jeremy, can you still see it this way?
Yeah, I got it.
All right. Yep. We're going to have to go old school here. All right, so quartered, obviously you're going to get some of that ray flecking here. It depends on the quality of the quarter, but this is very stable, and it's going to be more expensive than flat sawn, obviously, and it's a specific look. So one of the things that we hear is that this is an arts and crafts or mission style look, but not necessarily. It depends on how you're going to finish this. So what we have seen is, we have directed some clients into, hey, it is a lesser expensive alternative to rift. Yes, it's more than flat sawn, but depending on the finish, you can kind of model up some of that flecking, although that's what it's known for. So, in stickly furniture, that's what you're going for. So, this is an option for you. So let's keep rolling through the rift sawn we talked about. Obviously, it's the star of the show. This is what everybody's looking for. Let's just talk about this briefly. The rift sawing is similar to quartered. It's cut at a slightly different angle, so about 30 to 60 degrees. So to the growth rings, it produces boards with very tight grain and minimal ray fleck. The grain looks almost like a bundle of parallel lines, giving it a clean, modern aesthetic. And again, as we get into some further slides, you're going to see this is what designers are specifying, and you can see why they want it. So as I jump to this next slide, John from Manti was good enough to take some images. And really, I want you to jump in here, John, and talk about what we're seeing in this image. And it's a combination of veneer and solid.
Yeah, yeah. This is actually an image a customer provided to document the challenges they were seeing with this exact topic. You know, the feedback I get from a lot of uh, panel customers is the paneled ripped white oak or quartered is a lot of times a little bit lighter than some of the darker styles and rails, and getting those to match up was what we'll see here in a little bit on some of Joe's pictures where, you know, it can go wrong. So here, I think this kind of documents that well. You can kind of see the dimensioned lumber on top, and it's got a little bit broader range of color. You know, we strive when we're out buying logs to stay pretty consistent in color. But that being said, there is going to be a range of color. And when you're buying panels, probably where that is most controllable is the grade. A higher grade is going to have a more uniform color than a lower A grade even. So you'll just see some of that natural range no matter what. But I think this just kind of shows the challenge that we're looking at, you know, before it's all put together.
So, John, would you say on an average basis that your veneers are going to end up being on the lighter side of solid wood?
That is the feedback I've received back from a
Okay.
wide variety of customers. Is typically the panel on white oak is a little bit lighter. You know, we've talked about that. You know, internally, is it the region? Is it how it's processed? I don't know that there's necessarily a smoking gun, but there are different production processes to get to where we are right here. And, you know, then when you put that on a core, you're going to have even, you know, the potential is that core come through it all. I don't know. I mean, does that play into it? I don't think so. But the challenge there remains it's not always an even color going from panel to wood to hardwood.
Hey, Vince, can you chime in a little bit on this? Because you and I have talked about this at depth. You're doing a ton of rift white oak doors and cabinets as well as we are. I think you're finding the same thing, that the panel, especially on a slim shaker, as you modify a slim shaker, your panel is 3/4 ply veneer, and then you have a slim solid wood perimeter, which we all know is very popular today. Are you seeing the challenge of getting that solid wood to match up?
Yeah, that's it's something I think everybody is challenged with, is when you're marrying the plywood and the hardwood together. You're going from light colors to grays and darks in your hardwoods, and then you have a pretty consistent color, like John just said. So what we're seeing, this was a huge conversation with lots of our customers because nobody understood. Everybody's expectation of what their door is going to look like when they get it was different. And what everybody wants is different depending on what the level of price point they're at. And so, you know, there are different specifications. You know, I don't think that's for this video webinar, but we ended up going with a combed grain center panel on the plywood. And what we found is more consistency. And maybe, John, you can talk about this premium cost for this one. So for us, and Lamar's going to talk about, it's not just about marrying up colors that look. He's going to talk about application and then sanding, you know, being a part of this when you're doing with the slim shaker. One of the questions also, John, if you could address, was what is the grain variation? We understand a lot of times on the hardwood what the grain variation is going to look like. Does the veneer, is it all rift and pretty straight like the hardwood also, along with comb grain, is what I'm asking. What is the difference maybe in comb grain look?
So typically, you know, you can get if you're going for a more rustic look, you can get away with probably a B face in white oak, but it's just going to have too much variation for most people. So we've actually got 3 different grades of A: HPVA, regular A, and the comb grain. And the comb grain is without a doubt going to have the tightest grain, the most uniform color, pretty bulletproof as far as what we can do. I mean, it's as nice as what we can offer. Now, it's 3 times as much just about as the HPVA. So the price jumps pretty considerably in ripped white oak as you get to that, you know, it's supply and demand, and there's just very little close to perfect wood when you get to ripped white oak in veneer, just like lumber, as Jeremy was saying. So, we're not going to get a lot of that comb grain, and it's going to be $40 for just a sheet of veneer, roughly. So versus 25 or 30 for a lower grade A, but you're going to see a huge range of difference. The HPVAA, I wouldn't really offer to anybody. It's just not, unless you're just going to do a dark stain and you're just looking for kind of a natural look with a lot of variation. But that's not what most people who are using ripped white oak want. They want a very consistent, uniform look. And so, one option is to go to the highest grade that you feel like you can afford to pass along. And you certainly will get a more uniform panel that will be easier to work with and to match, I think. And I think you've seen that a little bit, Vince.
Yeah.
Yeah. And John, I want to clarify something you just said, because we did go to a comb grain as our standard for the panel as a door supplier. Okay. You said it's 3 times as much, but I think you're specifically referring to the veneer. When you go
On
to the
veneer
plywood,
side, just
it's
the veneer
maybe
cost.
a $20 to $30 premium. So it's not as bad.
That's
not
right.
as much as you would think.
That is accurate. And, it goes to, the value scale, right? You can spend more on the front end and have to deal with less that doesn't work very well on the back end, or vice versa, just depending on how you're set up and you like to do things.
All right. Thank you both. Thank you both for chiming in there. And so what I want to show next is just back to the popularity of the species and what are clients asking for? What really is the design trade looking for? And so when you're doing a vertical grade or horizontal grade veneer, comb grain might be your solution, right? Because you're not matching up solid woods. You'd agree with that, John and Vince, right? I think you would.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
The challenge. So like you see this kitchen, obviously it's a slab veneer door, edge banded door. You could either go, and this is obviously a rift white oak in a light or a blonde stain. This is really what designers are specifying. And purchasing the sheets, at least in sequence, is going to minimize that that variation. So if you can purchase sequence grain sheets, that would, obviously cost is a factor there, but you've just got to be very careful. If you've got 3 sheets on the shelf and you're buying in 10 more, the chances of getting those to match up could be very challenging. So my suggestion would be to order all of your bundles. John, correct? Like if we're ordering from Manti, we would get, you'd get them from the same flitch generally, correct?
Yeah, so sequenced, and a lot of times it's sequenced, matched, and numbered. It's just going to be, it's going to make sure that the material from that log stays together. So if you're putting doing doors for a cabinetry, you'll have a obviously better chance of uniformity if you're able to stay within the same log. Rift sequences are very small because the amount of veneer we get from any log or flitch is very small, just like with the lumber. So on a mahogany, you might get a 10 panel sequence. On rift, you might get 2 or 3 if you're lucky. So, the sequences are smaller, but it is, to your point, Joe, a very good way to ensure some uniformity from start to finish.
Excellent.
I think that's a great. And if any is and we can sequence match a number basically. When we are putting the veneer together, we are numbering each sheet and keeping that log together. If you're not familiar with that term, that's kind of what sequencing is. It's and it's really not that much extra for to that point either. So it's a little bit of security that you can offer yourself without a whole lot more expense.
As we get into the further slides, when we're talking about finishing any job like this, you're definitely going to want to lay out these doors onto an easel. I'll show this in a finishing room at Mullwoods coming up in a slide, but you're really going to want to match these panels, right? So they are laid up and toned out properly. So the next one I'm going to show is a medium stain on a transitional door. This is that slim shaker style that everybody's specifying. A medium stain, you can really modify that framing and tone it a little bit easier than if you're talking a natural. Natural is going to be your biggest challenge, and you know, I'm sure we're gonna have some finishers on this call chiming in on the challenges they're seeing. So again, we're just trying to present the challenges and then really have some dialogue. And I want to stay on time here, so we have plenty of time for questions. So one more here. Here's a good example of a rift job that has a little bit of cordage sneaking in there. You can kind of see it on this horizontal rail here below this upper door. It's going to happen. You're going to get some flecking sneak into this cut. So just be prepared when you see.
And I think, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I think we determined last week, we looked it up, 25% allowable. So, you know, you could technically get more even than a little bit and still, you know, technically be on grade. But
yeah,
hopefully it's lighter or smaller medullary rays.
Hey, Joe.
So, yes, please.
I was just looking at this picture here. I wanted to bring a couple points up to the listeners, you know, more on the hardwood side, but I think it's really important that all of us know where our raw material is coming from. Just alone in the state of Indiana, we have 18 different species of oaks, you know, 8 of them are white oaks, the other 10 are red oaks. And all those different species of white oak trees are allowed to be mixed together, whether it's swamp oak, the actual Quercus alba that is real white oak. And I think it's very important, you know, that as you're looking for a color solution, that we centralize our supply chains. You can't be jumping all over the country buying your white oak and expect a consistent product. And John knows that with veneers. You know, you need to be sourcing your stuff from a consistent area, and then you'll end up getting more consistent results because, you know, depending on the soil type, the climate, that all changes the way these trees grow. This is a natural God breathed product. And so I think it's really important that, you know, you stick with an area and you'll get consistent results.
Thanks, Jeremy. And this picture came up when we were doing a run through last week. Everyone, this is a beautiful, beautiful kitchen, but people have to understand, clients have to understand, you have to educate your clients that you're going to see staves on these panels show up slightly differently. And our suggestion from the KCMA is that you really do a door sample. And not just a color block, because a color block is just not going to give you enough of a variation, and you could run into challenges where your client says, "Hey, this is not what I signed up for. Pull this kitchen out. We're not happy with it." And obviously, that's not what anybody wants. So this to me would be an acceptable, beautiful tonal match. We're going to see a couple coming up that I feel we're not. So we'll see that here in a second. All right. So the challenges, back to the challenges of working with this is uniform appearance. The consistent linear grain creates a more uniform and modern look compared to other cuts. That's not the challenge, but that becomes a challenge if you have some varying grain. And again, clients need to understand what's acceptable and what's not. If they want no, variation, then an alternative product is something they should consider. So flecking, unlike quartered white oak, Rift has very, very little medullary rays. So and we talked about this as a group prior to the meeting. 25% is an industry acceptability rate. And then color variation. Back to what Jeremy was saying, white oak. Jeremy, how many species did you say?
There's at least 8 in the state of Indiana from north to south.
Okay, so there's 8 alone in the state of Indiana. So I mean, so just there, and we don't know where who's harvesting and where this is coming from. So there's a lot. It leaves a lot of challenges on our finishing rooms, and that's what we're going to get to here in a minute. So,
and I say that, Joe, because sorry about my buzzer ringing. I say that because if you're building a couple kitchens a month, you're probably not going to be talking directly with the sawmill and looking at their log decks to see what kind of white oak they're giving you. So I believe the solution is going to be a consistent source, as well as what Lamar is going to speak about in finishing.
Yeah. Now, and that, Jeremy, that goes right into the conversation of, a lot of us, mid-sized, smaller companies are outsourcing a lot of our product, right? So we're bringing in sheet goods, we're bringing in veneer, we're bringing in edge banding, we're sourcing solid wood, and then we're sourcing our doors from a door vendor. And so it really is challenging. So it's going to push a lot of that pressure into the finishing department. So just keep that in mind. There's no simple solution here, but we're going to come up with a couple that we think can help. All right, some ways to save cost, some alternatives. Quartered is running about half as expensive as Rift right now, so that is definitely something to consider, especially if you can stain that and maybe just put a little bit more of a medium hue on it, or even if you're going into the dark finishes, if your client's acceptable with that, then that should be an option for them. The ray fleck can sometimes become loose during manufacturing, and you may not see it. You may not see some of that fleck until you put stain or clear coat on it. Considering moving to Rift Red Oak, here's something that we as a group, we talked back at the spring convention, a couple of us, hey, start developing some red oak doors. And, if you can use Rift Red, and you can come up with some stains that are going to give you a close approximation of these medium to light tones, these blonde tones. It's just, I think we all know, and Lamar, you can chime in now at this point, if you don't mind. It's very difficult to get that pink or red hue out. Am I right?
Yeah, I mean that's one of the big challenges with the oak is the red or the pink hue, and so you got to be really careful on what process you put on it when it comes into the finish room. There are ways to do it. There are ways to do it well, but it comes with some challenges for sure.
And so I assume it comes with increased labor costs. So sometimes the cost you're saving on the material, it goes out the door on labor.
Labor cost, and one of the other challenges, it takes training, and so it's a process that not just anyone can do. It takes an experienced sprayer with a good color eye to really do it well.
Okay, and as we all know that, staffing is an issue nationwide. So training is definitely something that a lot of companies are challenged with. So, all right, let's move into a couple, again, finishing challenges and characteristics. This is what we would consider as an industry as being pleasing matches. So there is variation. You see the Slim Shaker again on the left on a blonde finish. You're going to have slightly darker, perimeter molding, but again, acceptable from our perspective. The middle is all solid wood with a routed recessed panel. This is a vertical grain match. You're going to see variations in tone on that white glazed finish, but that again is what we would consider acceptable. Again, showing pictures to your clients is really going to be the best option, and a full-size door or a full kitchen in your studio or showroom. And then to the right, you've got a shaker door, stave core, solid wood panels. And again, you're seeing some variation throughout this kitchen, but again, it blends out overall. And so we would consider these all pleasing matches. Here's some shots of what we would say are not pleasing. And these, unfortunately, these are some jobs that we've finished in-house at Village. And these were all finished. These that went well and these that did not are, and then we have to resolve these challenges. So one is, let's start on the right, is you've got a reeded door, solid wood reeds that really go dark and light. And correct me if I'm wrong, Vince, what you had mentioned is we really, or Lamar, I guess you both can chime in here. It's the sanding that really becomes challenging on these reeds.
Yeah, there's a lot of variables when it comes into the finish room, and one of them is definitely sanding. And so something with reeding really it's hard to get a consistent uniform sand before it comes into the finish room, and that's where we look for alternatives to create a uniform palette.
Yeah.
Lamar, what would you suggest? How would you suggest to sand a reading like that?
I mean, the best way is a hand sand. What we typically do is a 220 hand sand, which is super labor intensive,
Yeah.
but it gives you the best chance of having a uniform sand when it comes into the finish room.
Yeah.
There'll still be some variation, correct? Because it's hand sanding and it's really hard. It depends how it was routed, the quality of the bit, and some of those things also.
Yes, that is correct.
I think this goes back to your point, Joe, of the importance of having a sample door to show somebody. You know,
Yeah.
if you're covering your bases, so if that's what it's going to look like, and you at least are letting people know on the front end, that should help a little bit.
Yeah. So one of the options that came up in our conversations over the last couple of weeks was using a equalizer, and this is a solution that that Lamar brought to us and said, "Hey, here's an option for you." And I was really intrigued by this. And we have a lot of finishing manufacturers in KCMA, and it's interesting because you lean on your vendor to bring ideas to you, and sometimes you're just not getting that. And I'm dialed in, and I want to know more about this. So Lamar, tell us. You have a door on the left that is naturally finished in rift white oak, slim shaker, and a door on the right. Tell us what you did here.
Yeah, so we leaned on our manufacturer because we've dealt with this issue, especially when a project's coming in and you're combining plywood or veneers with hardwoods, which we've seen slides of what that can look like. And so how do we create a uniform substrate so that when we apply some color, everything looks uniform? And we've done things like bleaching, we've done things like using the NGR dyes, and to some level of success, but really not to what we were looking for. And so leaning on our manufacturer, we created what they call an equalizer. And it's basically an NGR dye, but it has some binder property in the resin. And so it creates not just a uniform color, but so a plywood, a hardwood, a veneer, they have different levels of how porous they are. And what the equalizer does is it creates a level playing surface over the whole substrate before you apply the color.
So Lamar, I mean, obviously the depths of the pores on the solid wood frame is much deeper than the pores on a 2 mil, veneer.
Correct. And so what the equalizer does is it kind of levels everything out. And so as soon as you apply color, you're not, because the hardwood is more porous, usually it'll get darker. But that with the equalizer on top of the whole project, you're creating a surface where it's the same porosity level over the whole surface, no matter if it's hardwood, plywood, veneer.
So let's dive a little deeper here, Lamar. Let's say a client wants rift white oak and they want a slightly different tone. So you did this. This is a natural finish, correct?
This actually has a light stain on it.
Okay.
So it's got the equalizer with a stain on top of it.
Okay, so you would treat this raw door after the sanding department. You treat this door with the equalizer, spray no wipe, spray and wipe. Like, tell us the application.
Yeah, it is. The application is just like a dye, spray no wipe. There's not a ton of color to it, and so the process is much easier than if you're actually trying to create the color with the dye.
Okay.
The equalizer has a little bit of color to give it a uniform color. But the big benefit is the binder that's in it, so that when you apply the stain, you have a uniform color.
Okay, so you spray a coat of equalizer, and then you go to your stain coat, whatever color that might be, and it's just preventing that stain from penetrating too deep into those pores. Correct?
Correct.
Okay, and then you go on with your typical process from there. Your sealer, your sealer sand, and your top coat.
Yep, correct. So the equalizer is one extra step. Again, added cost and labor, but it really helps you create a uniform color.
Excellent. All right, very good.
Lamar, is that a standard process then at your operation for all with rift white oak? jobs?
It depends on the color. For our light colors, for sure.
Excellent. Excellent.
Gotcha.
All right. Just one more set of pictures I want to show you. Using an easel, the one on the left, we don't have any doors shown on it, just a couple sitting up on the wall, up on the top right. But using an easel or laying those panels, in sequence is really one of the best ways to check that color. I know when I've been at some larger finishing rooms, I've seen easels everywhere and they're toning out in specific areas. So just keep that in mind. Again, just some more solutions that we came up as a team. We're saying, hey, material selection is critical. Source your raw material from a consistent region, if at all possible, or ask your vendor. Provide an entire door versus a small sample block that could go a long way from causing problems down the road. Doors, veneered panels versus stave cord hardwood panels. Obviously, if you say, hey, we offer a door, it's called our Harbor door, that automatically comes with a plywood panel, 3/8 plywood panel. Certain stains could be affected differently. So you may want to go with a stave core solid wood panel. Finishing, staging, like we said in the previous slide, staging how you're finishing these projects is critical. I would say it's very challenging if you're going to flatline finish rift white oak to get every door to match up if you're doing a spray no wipe or something along those lines. As doors are stained, they can be laid out like we showed in the previous image, and you can tone it. You can come in with a small toner gun and you can lay a little bit of color on some light spots. But again, maybe again, chime in there, Lamar, because you and I talked about this. You can all of a sudden go beyond on the color.
Yeah, I mean, you can go beyond in the color, and it also can create issues in your clear coats.
Okay.
Typically, coating manufacturers are not a fan of a lot of shading because it's basically just your pigment laying right on top of your substrate, which can create either short-term or long-term issues in your clear coat.
So adhesion issues.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Very good. So I think we have made it to the end. So we are willing to take questions here. I'm going to ask Lisa to jump back in and kind of moderate the questions, and we can all chime in.
Yep. Thank you all. First, just while you have a chance to put your questions in the Q&A box, we are recording this. We did record this. It'll be posted on the website and the slides will be distributed. So you'll be able to share that with members of your team who weren't able to join us. If anyone has any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A box. You can find that usually at the bottom of your screen in the Zoom menu. If you don't see it, click on the round circle with the 3 dots that says more on it, and it should pull up there. Oh, come on. I know you guys have to have questions. I had questions when I listened to this the first time.
Well, I'd like to make this is Vince again. And one of the points I'd like to make, just analyzing and stepping back from everything I heard, I think it's important for us to have education and understand our specifications. If we go into this blindly, we put the pressure and stress in our finish room or on the dealer or in the customer's home. And we know our most expensive and most complex issues to fix happen in our finish room or at a dealer or in a customer's home. It becomes expensive, and you're going to see blue tape. Everybody's nightmare is blue tape on the kitchen, going out and figuring it out. And so just stepping back, I think what we're trying to do is we didn't have all the answers today. What we have is enough to get you curious and to broaden your information so that you know what to ask and how to manage rifts on. One of the things you're going to have to decide is, what is your price point? Or we have a simple offering or a complex offering? Who's my audience? And so, if you're offering everything, you're going to have to start with specification in the finished room in mind versus ordering, sending it through, those types of things. And so what kind of finish room do you have? What are the, you have the complexity to manage a wide offering, those types of things. And so just a couple notes that I took from that, besides, managed customer expectations, deciding simple versus complex, and then really being clear to customers. I was thinking when you were showing the reeded, Joe, in our finish room, we're not going to do it perfectly and take 2 days to get it right, because that's not the effort we want to put in when a customer orders it. So you want to put a realistic sample out there in sanding that's possible to do in a fair amount of time. So you have to look at price and what people are willing to pay also.
Yeah, that's a great point, Vince. We've seen all over the years where a finisher will make a sample absolutely perfect, and then you say, is this really doable over a large project? I mean, that's how much of an art this is, and that's it really it's some science, but there's a lot of art in it. So
I'd like to
Okay.
make a quick point, if I could, to your last point there, Vince, is that on where you want to land, and customer expectations, and more expensive and better, or more expensive doesn't necessarily, it's not the only direction you can go, right? So we've got, customers who use pleasing or plank matches as their center panel, and they can get away with a little bit lower grade. And I think what they're doing from the very beginning is just presenting it as, not a TFL perfect knockoff where there is, not any uniformity, but they're basically saying, hey, and so price point, it's probably half the cost, and I think it just goes to, setting that customer's expectations from the get-go, because, they're obviously selling cabinets to somebody, right? So just understanding where people want and giving them their options it's a big range of cost options, I would think.
all right. Thank you.
Okay, we do have a couple of questions. Two questions that kind of go hand in hand for Lamar about the equalizer. Is it a standard finishing product or specific to a particular supplier, and who supplies it?
Yeah, so the equalizer, the name, the verbiage is pretty specific to our supplier. The key would be going to your supplier and asking for something with a resin binder in it, which it's a small percent a binder in a resin, and that's the key. The equalizer is pretty specific to our supplier, and I'm not actually sure if I'm allowed to share that name on here or not. So
yeah, I think that's good enough. I mean, really, that's the product, a resin binder. So I'm sure equalizer could be just their trademark name.
yeah, it is.
Okay, and then you mentioned 25% flex acceptable on the rift cut. I believe that would be 25% of the surface. Is there a maximum dimension of the flex, as we have seen some much bigger and others barely visible?
Jeremy, can you chime in on that?
I really cannot answer that.
Yeah, that's a tough question.
On the size of the rays.
Yeah, I used to grade lumber, and it was always tough when you get that board that's 80% rift, but then on one edge you've got fleck, right? And I think it's a little bit of a judgment call on the grader. I mean, I think that any lumber grader is going to do their very best to make sure that is minimal or small, but I'm not sure that it says in the book, anything about what size that is allowed. So, it's hopefully normally on one edge where you see that kind of return to the quarter or the return to cathedral, whichever it might be. But I don't think that it does specify the size.
If there's a way for the questioner, I'll talk to my folks at Purdue and see if there's something in the grading rules regarding the ray size in the rift. And I'll send that to you, Lisa, to send out.
Yep, absolutely. I have the name of the person who asked the question, so I can provide that to them. The next question is to please explain the combed veneer.
That's you, John.
Yeah, so comb grain veneer is just going to be the highest grade veneer we offer, and it's going to have its own set of rules. It is specified how much it can move, so it's going to be very straight from top to bottom. And we do try to maintain a very consistent color for that. It's considered kind of a AA grade, essentially. We develop it, as we can, but it's a very small percentage of what we yield. And it's, I'm just going to guess that it's $10 a sheet higher than the next highest A grade panel that we offer. But, you could go through a stack of 20 and you'd see the difference. So, if you're looking to maximize your value in, to have the very least variation, it's a good thing to look at. Yeah, and that would be available in ripped red or ripped white if you wanted to, go either way there.
Hey, Lisa, I got a side question that came in from somebody. So the question was, what about alternative materials? Obviously, we all know that the flooring industry is just loaded with alternative materials that have this amazing look of rift white oak in a very consistent color. Are there panels out there or doors or vendors? One of the vendors that this question was noted as a product called Shinoki, Shinnoki. They're pre-finished wood panels. From DecoSpan, and they really, there are options out there. It's got grain. But again, as a custom manufacturer, we have to realize that the colors that those products come in are the colors that you have to present. It's not like you can use that product and then go stain it. It's their pre-finished products.
Okay, another question came in. Is the rift red oak darker on the solid wood than the veneer panels?
Is the rift red oak darker, did you say?
Yes.
The panel than the versus the stiles and rails?
I think, John, what they're referring to is you've seen the rift. The veneer tended to be lighter, and we had darker variations on the hardwood on the picture.
Oh, sure, sure.
They're saying, is that similar when it's red?
Yeah. We're probably 9-to-1 white to red. So I can't say that I've had our rift red oak customers reach out to us as much with difficulties. I think that the rift red oak may more often lend itself to a darker stain. I don't know if you guys might be able to confirm that or not, but I've not heard of people fighting with rift red oak like they have the white oak. And I think it's just, often is a really light stain, and it's just a lighter wood to begin with.
One of the things to piggyback on that, John, is that we've talked at a couple meetings, some of the other manufacturers, about, hey, why don't we as a manufacturing group start to showcase these rift red oaks and promote them in our catalog of finishes, because we do have some say in what the clients are seeing. So that's something we should consider as a group. Hey, make up some rift red oak samples, put them in your showroom, and see and test out some of these colors. And maybe we can get some clients moving into that direction and save them some cost.
I just speak about that color issue on the plywood. I mean, I think it comes back down to that natural product where the veneer was sourced from. Rift and quartered trees that are veneer trees are going to be the absolute best of the best trees available versus the hardwood. So you're going to get the best colored wood. Our experience here is we don't see that much color variation in the red oak versus the white oak. That's our experience.
You just don't see as much variation, you said there?
Not on our end, but
okay. All right.
It all comes down to where you're sourcing it. You start sourcing your red oak from, the South, and
for sure.
There's such a huge difference because of the climate and the temperature and the growing season.
I think that white oak, maybe goes back to arts and crafts, but it just a thought. There's a big difference between quartered white oak and quartered red oak. The medullary ways on white oak are much bigger, but on rift, you kind of remove that. So I think the difference between rift red and rift white would be less And we do have customers who only offer ripped red as an option. And, you know, I'm sure they probably lose some business because the customer wants white, but again, you can probably steer a lot of people that direction if you're starting with that and presenting that to begin with.
There you go.
On the red oak. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna preface the following question by saying that I was the person who looked up and found the 25% ray allowance during our prep
Thank
call.
you. Okay.
And I found it on Google. So Brian,
it was
Crown-
AWI spec, I believe
Correct.
you said
That's
last
but
week.
it was from like the Google AI response bot. So
Yes.
Jeremy, or Brian Crown says, Jeremy, I challenged the 25% ray allowed. My mills are allowing 30, which turns into 40, especially when they can't move the quartered product. So
Right.
I'm taking the fall for the 25%
Wow,
in case
that's-
that was not correct.
Lisa,
No,
that's
it's great to know that people are
that's
struggling.
good information.
Yep.
But again, the speakers are not responsible for that one. I am.
No, but
And it may not be wrong. It just may be what they're getting may not be as right as they would like. And you know, I think that most, you know, that was an AWI spec. I think we should probably look up the hardwood or the what's the
NHLA.
lumber grading book.
NHLA.
Probably should look in there to see what that says. That might be slightly different. But either way, it's an issue. And, you know, I mean, yeah, you almost have to factor that in when you're doing cost. Is if you don't want that fleck in, you're ripping that off, and you know, it's just more waste.
Okay, we do have a couple more. This is more of a comment. If misery loves company, we have enough to go around. Seems like we're all fighting with the same issues. Maybe we have to go after the bourbon barrel makers. Great content, and we use the education and many other topics discussed. Education is key. I volunteer to drink the bourbon from the barrels, and then you all can have the barrels to do with what you please.
So Lisa,
win-win.
if I can chime in there, that is a well-known fact throughout the industry that some of the best white oak is going to the barrel industry. It's been throughout all the publications. They're all talking about it. So, and the bourbon industry is willing to pay top dollar for this. Jeremy, John, you've heard the same thing?
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
It's hard. It's been competitive for the last 10 years for white oak.
That's what's
for
driven the
lumber and
price
veneer.
up. Also,
What's that, Jeremy? Sorry.
that's also what's driven the price up is the bourbon.
Yeah.
And,
Sure.
yeah, so, but you know, one regarding the red oak as an alternative, I mean, there's so much more red oak available, and the rift in a quartered red oak log is there's 45% more of it. So half of a quartered red oak log is going to make rift. So just, it's a lot higher percentage if your clients can accept that, you know?
Yeah.
And then one last comment or question. I've heard that other industries are also challenging the oak supply. Is it true? And are we competing directly with what we are seeking? So we kind of had that conversation a little bit just now, flooring, bourbon, wine barrels, et cetera. So I guess the answer to that question is absolutely.
Yeah. For sure. I mean, you're always, you know, differing industries are always going to be fighting for the best material. And we've often heard that some of the best logs go to the Far East. Is that, John, is that still the truth?
Yeah, Far East and white oak's always been pretty popular in Europe. I know they have a white oak over there, but there's a lot of white oak that goes to Europe as well. Yeah. Historically, there has been, at least.
Hey, Lisa, I have one more question that came through via text for some reason. This one's for you, Lamar. When you're using red oak, preferably rift, how do you get that pink out? Are you using some sort of green sealer or toner, or like a Mohawk green or something like to kill that pink? What's your thoughts there?
Yeah, that's a challenge. And just chiming in on the red oak thing, we love to finish red oak in the finish room. It stains nice. It's usually more uniform than the white oak. The challenge is always the red, and because right now the industry and all the trade magazines are showing these blonde stains, that becomes the issue. Yeah. If we are trying to get the red out, we are flooding it with a green toner of some sort to try to kill as much red as possible. But again, there's only a certain level you can get to, and before you actually come up with like a weird purple color. So
Yeah, yep. We've seen that, so in the past years when we were doing more of the bleaching of walnut, you were heading into the green and purples. Yeah. So we all know these challenges. It's why I hope this was helpful to everybody today, because there's no one size fits all solution. It's a combination of educating your client, of having a really talented finishing department, and really sourcing. And it seems to be those three. Vince, would you second those kind of three top level kind of takeaways?
Yeah, I think this is where we've leaned on our suppliers more than normal. We've all been dealing with red oaks, maples, cherries for so many years, and now paints, obviously, for there's a stretch. And so this new species that brings so many different challenges than we're used to, we've leaned on all of our suppliers for education, and we dabbled around with it. And we've decided what makes sense for our customer base and what kind of complexity can we manage.
Yep. All right.
Can I make one more comment on the veneer panels? I encourage people to try to make sure they're getting a slip matched or a pleasing matched. Probably slipped. Pleasing is that's a price saving measure, but book matched ripped white oak tends to create something called the barber pole effect, which can even create more finishing challenges. So, if you've got the option to ask from your supplier for slip matched, I think that would be a better way to go. Book match is going to be the standard matching for all plain slice items. Most people who do a lot of rift and white oak generally tend towards slip match. So that might be something that helps people as well.
Okay, we have just 1 or 2 minutes left before the top of the hour. There's one more question. There's another comment that I'll go ahead and post in the chat. But the question is, can the resin binder make red oak look like white oak? I've heard of companies trying to do something like this due to the availability issues with white oak and get away from the color variations.
Yeah, again, I know there's been a lot of different people trying different products to do that. I would say with pretty limited success in actually having red oak look like white oak. And anything you do to get anywhere close is really, really labor intensive as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you all for attending. I posted in the chat a link to where the webinar will be posted. I'm going to say tomorrow, just because I was out yesterday and I have some things still to catch up on, and I'll need to edit the video a little bit. Also, if you have other questions, please feel free to email them to me, and I'll get them out to the team to generate a response to you. And we remind you that the KCMA Product Trends Survey is now open, and we encourage as many participants to that survey as possible. Both suppliers and manufacturers are able to participate in that. And registration for the fall conference in Montreal, September 29th to October 2nd has opened. So if you haven't registered and booked your hotel rooms for that yet, please do so quickly. That's all from my end. Joe, you have any final words?
No, thank you, Lisa, for facilitating, and thank you to the panel. I hope it was helpful for everybody, and we look forward to keeping the topics going in the fall meetings.
Great job.
Thank you, everybody.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.